Hi, I'm Dr. Hampton, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our second edition of the Healthy Living Program, where you'll learn how to eat your way to a healthier life. The secret to being healthy is you have to keep your life simple. So what I want you to do is think about one main dish and a couple of sides, maybe cook 3 times a week, and have leftovers. You'll have an easy time feeding your family a healthy meal. Oil is the secret to helping you live a healthy life. That's because fat is actually your friend. And if you look at the macronutrients that we use, we only have fat, protein, and carbs. Fat is the one that doesn't raise your sugar and also helps you to lose weight. Why? Because when you eat fatty food, your body goes into fat metabolism, and once that occurs, then your body starts to burn body fat. Here before me are my favorite sources of fat. I love avocados, probably one of the healthiest vegetables that we know of because it's mostly fat, probably about 80% fat. And when you eat that type of food, you're really going to do your body some good. We also have things that may surprise you like butter. Believe it or not, more so than margarine, butter is a great source of fat, and of course it really helps to season your food really well. So I want you to start being less afraid of butter as you prepare your meals moving forward. We also have olive oil. Most of us already know olive oil is a great food to cook with, and if the temperature is not too high, olive oil is a great source of fat and also a great way to season your food. I also love coconut oil, and although this is Pam, this type of oil is really good to not only make things not stick, but it's also particularly great at higher temperatures. And you may have noticed avocado oil in the grocery stores has been very popular because it's also a cooking oil that's healthy, that's similar to coconut oil in that it can handle the high temperatures. Now I want to spend a moment just to remind you that seasoning your food is actually pretty easy. For today's meal, we're going to be using Italian seasoning. You don't have to really worry about salt, and of course there's no carbs in that. We also have garlic powder. When you buy garlic powder, you don't get garlic salt because a lot of the foods that we eat already have too much salt in it already. The goal is to use the powder, and if you need to add a little salt, feel free to do that. If you're not too busy and you have time to use natural garlic, that's a much better option. You want to season your vegetables and your meat, and you don't want to add a lot of salt. Liquid smoke is a very good seasoning, and it really does add a lot of flavor without the negative effects of adding salt. So I want you to think about keeping your seasoning simplistic in order to make your food taste great. Alright guys, I'm really excited because who doesn't love pizza? In fact, I think it's in the top 20 of foods that we consume the most in America. The only problem is that the crust is typically made with flour, water, and egg, and the flour is a highly processed food. So we want to move away from things like flour because a tablespoon of flour is equivalent to ½ tablespoon of sugar in terms of carbs. So for a diabetic and a person trying to lose weight, that's really tough on the body. So what we have here is an alternative, and that's rice cauliflower. In other words, cauliflower that was shredded into the form of rice. We're going to combine it with cheese, in this case Parmesan cheese, and an egg. I want to make sure we pay attention to the sauce that we use on our pizzas. Now you can make your own sauce with tomato paste and basil, but if you buy the sauce, make sure that your sauce doesn't have added sugar. Alright, so this is one of my favorite sides, which is macaroni and cheese, but instead of using pasta, I like to use cauliflower because it's a very low carb vegetable that's really healthy, and it's going to become one of your favorite sides, I promise. And finally, one of my new favorite vegetables is Brussels sprouts. What's cool about Brussels sprouts is that they're very healthy, but when prepared properly, particularly with olive oil and some onions and sometimes even with bacon, Brussels sprouts taste delicious. It's time to make a delicious pizza. Again, this is one of our favorite entrees, and what we're going to do is again avoid the starchy flour, and now we're going to instead feed our family a vegetable, which is much better for them. So you can actually buy a grater and shred your cauliflower into this rice-sized portions. But nowadays you can go into the grocery store and actually buy rice cauliflower, which is really convenient. And when you look at the package, you'll see it's only 4 carbs, and you can subtract a fiber, and it's actually 2 net carbs. So this is really a low carb, awesome alternative to a doughy pizza crust made of flour. So what I'm going to do is actually apply some non-stick spray, which is made of coconut oil in this particular case, prepared by spraying it And then I'm going to take my riced cauliflower and just pour it on top. And what's really nice about this is that it's very simple, it's easy, and the point of doing this is to get some of the moisture out of the cauliflower. If you look online, there's different ways you can do it. This is a much easier way. You want to keep life simple because most of us are very busy and we want to do something that's really quick. And I can tell right now that it's not too brown. I haven't really cooked it. Now I'm about ready to get it out of this heat. If you don't let it cool down, you may have problems with the egg, which I'm going to add to it, cooking, or the cheese melting too much. So let's go ahead and remove this from the heat and put it in our bowl. And what I'm going to do is let it cool off for a good 10 minutes or so. And it feels like it's cooled off really nicely, and that's time for Parmesan cheese. Now, I was not a big fan, but I learned that that really holds the crust better. So I'm going to add my Parmesan cheese, just a cup, to rice cauliflower. And then I'm going to add a whole egg. And don't be afraid of the whole egg, including the yolk, because actually the yolk is where all the nutrients are. And if you eat a low-carb, high-fat diet, you'll actually improve your cholesterol in most cases instead of make it worse. It's just important that you work with your doctor and let them know when you're changing your diet. So let's go ahead and add this egg. And now we just want to mix it all together. And the egg really helps to hold things together. And once this mixture is in the oven, the cheese will also help to hold things together. And it's more pasty now. And what I want to do now is bring over my pan. Before I started my healthy living journey, I really wasn't using a lot of parchment paper. It was always aluminum foil. And the first time I tried to make a pizza with aluminum foil, it didn't go well because it actually stuck. Parchment paper is magical in that things just don't stick. So what I'm going to do is take my mixture and I'm going to center it in the middle of my parchment paper. The real secret is the edges. So what you don't want to do is have a very thin edge, because if it's too thin when it's cooking in the oven, it'll actually cook a little faster and it may actually darken and burn. And I wouldn't recommend making a very large pizza. I prefer you make smaller versions of it because that way it won't break apart when you're putting it together. I usually set my oven at around 400 degrees and I'll put this in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then, while that's happening, you can start working on preparing your toppings. And one of my favorite toppings is actually kale. And I know most of us are more familiar with spinach. But you know, kale is really good. In fact, arguably it's the healthiest green leafy vegetable on the planet. It's filled with nutrients, a lot of vitamins, and it's really tasty, especially if you prepare it the way we do. So we put it on the stovetop and we saute it in some olive oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil, and it really adds flavor. Onions are very healthy when it comes to cancer and things like that, and they also add a lot of flavor. I had an uncle who would literally eat an onion like it was a tomato, and I couldn't believe it. He would just eat it, and he's still around, so I guess he did the right thing. As you know, bell pepper is another great source of nutrients. In fact, all the different peppers are great, and you can use a red pepper, bell pepper. You kind of make it your own, and that's what I love about pizzas. You can make all these different pizzas for everybody in the family, and they can literally have their own version. And finally, I mentioned earlier that you can actually add an animal product if you'd like. In our case, we have some chicken. So this chicken was just kind of cut into little pieces, and that's going to serve as a topping. You can use other types of meat as well. You can use things like Italian sausage. The key to meats is just moderation. And as long as you do that, you should be really good when it comes to your health. Nice. It's exactly what I was expecting. And to prove it to you, that I can actually go and just give you a sense of that it's really an actual crust. As you can see, it's actually intact. And so the combination of the cheese, the cauliflower, and the egg, it all comes together and form a really nice, structurally intact pizza crust, which is really cool. So we have our crust ready, and now we need to turn into a real pizza. it's really important that you spread the sauce all the way around, close to the edges, because if you don't, you have a chance that it's going to burn. Make sure you always use something that's going to keep your hands safe, and we're going to put that in the oven. Alright guys, I smell pizza, so let's go ahead and see what we ended up with. And here we go. Looks like a delicious pizza. Best to put it on a rack and allow it to cool off that way. You can actually eat this pizza guiltlessly because you probably only get about 4 or 5 net carbs per serving, and it's delicious. I love this vegetable, which kind of tastes like cabbage a little bit because it's so good for us. It actually has a lot of antioxidants, which are really good for cancer prevention. It also has great vitamins like vitamin K, vitamin A, vitamin C, and even copper, and it also has a lot of iron. So it's very nutritious. And today I want to show you how I prepare my Brussels sprouts so that they can actually taste good, so you can even get your kids to eat it. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is point out that sometimes you have a little bit of a stalk, so that little stalk needs to be cut off. So I'm going to give you an example of what I do when I prepare my Brussels sprouts. I'm going to cut that stalk off, and then what I want to do is sometimes I'll take off the top layer, because sometimes that layer is where you may find some of the chemicals and things of that nature. And then I'm going to just simply cut it in half. I just like it better when I bite into a Brussels sprout and it's like this, as opposed to a whole Brussels sprout. And you may find the same. You'll also see on my counter some oils. Now, when it comes to oils, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, you really want to use either avocado, coconut, or olive oil. And you can also use a little butter. For high temperatures, it's probably better to lean towards avocado and coconut oil, but when I bake things in the oven, I tend not to have as much of a problem for olive oil. So if you want to use olive oil, that's okay, but just keep in mind, high temperatures, particularly on the stove top, you want to avoid the olive oil. We're also going to use our seasoning, and you got to keep it simple. So we use a lot of salt and pepper in my home, and that's really all you need. If you like garlic, however, using a garlic clove or garlic powder, that'll add a ton of flavor to your Brussels sprouts. So I know it seems like this is a little too easy, but it really is. Now simply add the oil to the Brussels sprouts. And if you notice, I'm being a little generous. And again, the biggest thing you have to learn when you're working with the Healthy Living team is that we are okay with oil. We're okay with fat. And that's going to take some time to get accustomed to, but that's going to be the secret. Because again, when you eat fat, you burn fat. We're also going to season it with a little salt and pepper. And you can be as generous as your palates desire. And again, if you have medical conditions where you have things like congestive heart failure and high blood pressure that's not well controlled, you want to be very cautious about salt, but in general you can use a little salt, and if you're not sure, you can always talk to your doctor about that. And then finally I'm going to add a little garlic powder. So it looks like the oil is mixed really good in the Brussels sprouts, and again you can use onions and also bacon, and bacon is probably one of our favorite things to add to food. And there's really no big problem with bacon per se, but it is smoked and cured and salted, and the curing process can make it less healthy than meat that hasn't been cured. And what I found when I did my research is that when you add cured meat to vegetables, you're probably okay. If you eat cured meat and you don't have vegetables with it, that's when you have a problem. So now that everything's kind of mixed together in our dish, I'm now going to take this and put it in the oven. And the secret to making Brussels sprouts taste delicious is that you want to periodically, every 10 minutes, just make sure it's moving around. It keeps your eyes on the Brussels sprouts, and you're just going to wait until it gets kind of brown. So it's really easy. Anybody can do this, but you just want to pay attention to the cooking process. We are ready to get our mac and cheese going, and I'm really excited because guess what? This is really simple. Cauliflower is probably my favorite vegetable because it can replace so many things. For example, cauliflower can replace rice. It also can replace mashed potatoes, potato salad, mac and cheese, and it can be a pizza crust. So there's just so many things you can do with cauliflower, primarily because it doesn't have a strong taste, as is the case with rice, as is the case with most pastas and things like potatoes. Until you season it, it doesn't really have a taste. So all you do is you season this cauliflower like those other things and you'll be fine. I also like cauliflower because it's so good for us. In fact, it's probably one of the best vegetables to prevent cancer because it actually has a compound called sulfur in it, and it's actually one of the reasons why you can smell it sometimes, because that sulfur gives out that smell. Cauliflower also is a good anti-immune vegetable. So whether you're suffering from arthritis, heart disease, and stroke are actually conditions that are a reflection of too much inflammation. Importantly, we're a low-carb, high-fat group, so we're really into low-carb vegetables. Well, cauliflower only has about 5 carbs, 2 fiber, so there's only 3 net carbs. Let's compare that to just rice in general. Rice in general has about 28 grams of carbs, and what we do is we divide that number by 4 and you get 7 teaspoons of sugar. So if you're diabetic, have problems with your weight, it wouldn't really make sense to have that type of rice when you can use cauliflower rice. So cauliflower really has a lot of benefits that are tremendous for your body. And I just wanted to make sure you understood what they were. So now that we have that information, let's go ahead and figure out what we need to do. And with the cauliflower, of course, you're going to remove the green part, and you want to cut it up into bite-sized pieces. There's no magic to how big it should be. But let me give you an idea of what I did with this cauliflower. And here's about how I cut it, about this size. And if you grab one, it's about this big. And it can be as big as you'd like, because you're trying to mimic macaroni. So this is what it ends up looking like. Alright guys, let's get this sauce ready for our macaroni and cheese. And it's going to be very simple. You only have 3 main ingredients. That's butter, cheese, and milk. So the butter that we selected is salted already. So when you have salted butter, you may not need to add additional salt. And we're going to get this into our saucepan. Alright, so we'll get that going, and then our next ingredient will be our milk. Now this milk is a 2%, but to be honest with you, it could have been whole milk, and I probably wouldn't go any lower than 2%. Why? Because fat is not a problem, so whole milk is okay. So let's go ahead and eye it a little bit. And again, my mom taught me the secret to cooking is to eye your food and to put your heart and soul into it, and it'll taste good anyway if you do that, right? And now we're going to add about a half of our Kobe Jack cheese, but you can actually use whatever cheese you're accustomed to. I think the big message is that you can follow the recipe that the Healthy Living team is offering you, but most people find that if they use their own recipe, that's definitely going to be a better way to go, because then it'll taste just like they're accustomed to. Now I just need to mix this up. Heat it just long enough that the cheese has melted and ready for adding to your cauliflower. So just think about it. You think of an animal product that you like, you can bake that, and you can add the oils to it, which is good because it's healthy fat, the olive oil, the coconut oil, etc. You have 2 non-starchy sides, like the 2 non-starchy sides we have here. You make enough for 2 or 3 days, and you only cook 2 or 3 times a week. And the oven does all the work, so it's not a lot of difficulty in doing it. And once you understand the concept that fat helps your body go into fat burning mode and it helps you lose weight and doesn't raise your sugar, you'll realize that a low carb, high fat diet is the best diet for you. So thank you for taking the time to spend some time with me in the kitchen. I look forward to sharing more recipes in the future.